The country's Channel 2 television network reported in January that it has been a full year since Prime Minister Netanyahu last engaged with the Israeli press. And 1 month after the TV station's report, there has still been no press conference, no interview. In fact, he hasn't even taken a single question. Reporter Sנייder established a stopwatch to keep track of the time as it slips by. You can see it right here on my screen. This is on her blog. According to the site, it has been 1 year, 40 days, almost an hour, that's 46 minutes, and the seconds are counting, since he has given a single interview to the Israeli press. Now, ironically, Netanyahu grants numerous interviews in many languages to the foreign press. To add insult to injury, the Prime Minister's YouTube account uploaded this compilation of interviews given to PBS, CBS, NBC, and Univision. And in Sniejder's blog, she notes that this is an odd juxtaposition, especially in the, quote, only democracy in the Middle East, as Netanyahu often refers to Israel. Tal writes on her blog, as a political blogger, I don't begin to imagine I'd get a sit-in with Netanyahu, but I would certainly try to ask the Prime Minister questions at press conferences, if only he would hold them. And there's so much to discuss. Just 2 weeks ago, Netanyahu himself convened a meeting of ministers to discuss how to cope with the growing threat of economic boycotts on Israel in light of the occupation and settlement construction in the West Bank. And joining us now to discuss Netanyahu's domestic silence is journalist and blogger Emily Haouser, who writes for Israel's daily Haaretz. Emily, thanks so much for being with us. I want to start by quoting back something you wrote in Haaretz earlier this month. You said, the hubris is remarkable, the sheer disrespect breathtaking. Democracies stand or fall on the ability of the electorate to make informed decisions, and in refusing to answer questions, the Prime Minister is defaulting on an obligation that he has to all 8 million Israelis. Emily, why are you so frustrated by this? Why did you feel compelled to write this?
Well, I also, in addition to my writing, I also teach politics in the media, so I'm very painfully aware of the debt that politicians owe to the people in a democracy who have chosen them to present to serve them. And the fact is that people in a democracy have to have information to be able to be active members of that democracy and to do their job. And they cannot walk up to the Prime Minister and ask their own questions, so they are entirely dependent on the press to fill that role. And if the Prime Minister is not allowing the press to fill that role, it says a lot about what he thinks about the priority of speaking to his people, of giving information to his people.
And Emily, you say that it would almost be impressive if it weren't shameful. It's odd to see that compilation uploaded to his own YouTube platform, from his account. It seems as though, it's not as though he's not aware of this. Why is this shameful to you? And given all the controversy, if you look in some of the mainstream media here, in the New York Times and other magazines, for as much as Prime Minister Netanyahu has been giving interviews to the American press, you're seeing a lot of critical reporting done about Israel here in America, and I would imagine that, to your point, the Israelis deserve to have at least a fair sense of self-criticism as well. Why shameful, though?
Well, I think it's shameful because the people who have a right to his answers are the people who elected him and pay taxes in that country. With all due respect to the American press, with all due respect to anybody elsewhere in the world, they don't have a right to his time. The people who elected him and pay him have a right to his time. And an interesting little bit of trivia is that he has been interviewed by Wolf Blitzer in the recent past and will likely be so again. And Wolf Blitzer actually got his start at the Jerusalem Post. So, the interesting fact is that if Wolf Blitzer were a journalist working in Israel now, he would not get a chance to talk with the Prime Minister. However, since he's at CNN and, he's Wolf Blitzer at CNN, but the Prime Minister is more than happy to speak with CNN. And that's what's shameful to me. Nobody else around the world deserves his time in this way, and the people who do deserve it are not getting it.
And do you think that that would, it's just, I don't know how to actually even frame the question, because for me, this seems like, people in Israel must know that this is the case, the press corps there, but also just independent journalists. And aside from this blog, your writing, I mean, it's not as though a lot of people seem to be complaining about it, at least in English. Maybe that's different inside of Israel, maybe in Hebrew. Do you imagine this changing anytime soon? Can he continue to get away with not answering to the people who, as you say, rightfully deserve an answer?
Well, the truth is that the Israeli press, there are a couple of things going on. First of all, there's a cultural, people are kind of culturally used to this kind of reaction to the press. As adversarial as a relationship is in any democracy between the press and its leader and a country's leaders, it is perhaps even more so in Israel. And there's a cultural expectation that if a politician doesn't want to talk to the press, well, that's his right. Why should he have to or she have to? But having said that, the Israeli press is beginning to talk about it. Clearly, they've been noticing it. There are standard annual interviews, for instance, at the Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah or at the Independence Day. The Prime Minister traditionally gives an interview, and he has not done that. And in recent days, there have been some reports, for instance, Barak Ravid, who's a diplomatic reporter with Haaretz, was on a news magazine on Israeli television just the other day talking about the fact that he doesn't take questions from his own press corps and getting yelled at by a right-wing political strategist who has worked and continues to work as an aide, as far as I know, as an advisor to Netanyahu. And so he brought it up in that situation, and a Netanyahu aide advisor yelled at him, talked over him, framed it as an issue of a right-wing prime minister not wanting to talk with the minority left-wing as represented by the press.
Right.
And then also Yediot, another big daily, did a video package where they talked about what the prime minister is willing to talk about when he gives statements to the press.
Yeah.
So they're also discussing. I mean, it's coming up.
It seems that it's coming up, and I have to say, quite honestly, I want to thank you for writing that piece for Haaretz, because I wasn't aware of Israel Channel 2, and I'm starting to see a lot more traction now, and I also want to thank you for joining us. Hopefully, as this evolves, perhaps you can join us again, Emily.
Thank you so much.
In China, police have rescued 382